Welcome back, everyone. Today we're taking a deep dive into something a bit different, a memoir, actually.
Oh, interesting.
It's by Chris Piorkowski, and we'll be focusing on a specific excerpt, one that details his childhood
Okay.
in communist Poland, no less, before the fall of the Berlin Wall.
Wow, that's quite a setting. I bet there are some stories there.
Oh, you bet. Just from this excerpt, it's clear he went through a lot. Escaping an abusive home, for one.
That's awful, but sadly not uncommon. What's unusual here, I guess, is the historical backdrop.
Exactly. It's this blend of intense personal struggle against the backdrop of, well, Cold War tensions and political upheaval.
You don't often see those elements combined so closely.
You really don't. So, to kick things off, Chris starts by describing his early childhood. Loving family, active in his church, served as an altar boy, excelled in school. Sounds almost idyllic.
It does, but I imagine things take a turn, knowing what we know about his later life.
They do, and pretty sharply, too. See, woven into this happy picture are some incredibly difficult experiences he went through as a kid.
Oh, like what?
He witnessed the deaths of several childhood friends, some on truly tragic accidents.
That's heavy stuff, especially for a child.
It is, and he talks about how it prompted these existential questions at such a young age.
That makes sense. Kids are trying to make sense of the world, and then something like that happens. It just throws everything into question.
Exactly, how could a loving God allow such things?
Right. It really challenges that whole concept of a benevolent higher power.
And then, where did these friends go after they died?
Yeah, those questions of the afterlife and what it all means.
It's a lot to process for anyone, let alone a young boy.
Absolutely. And in a society already permeated with fear and uncertainty, like communist Poland.
I bet it added this whole other layer of complexity to his understanding of the world. It's almost like his sense of safety and security was just shattered.
I'd imagine it forces you to confront the fragility of life much earlier than most.
Right. And this realization, it probably colored his perceptions of everything around him, especially the communist regime and its control over, well, people's lives.
Makes sense. It's like a stark reminder that even in seemingly safe environments, tragedy can strike just out of the blue.
And it's not just his peers dying either. There's also his family history, particularly his parents' relationship. It was far from stable.
Ah, so the instability wasn't limited to the larger political climate. It was right there at home, too.
Exactly. And it's interesting because when he describes his grandparents' marriage, he presents it as this kind of, well, practical arrangement.
Practical.
Yeah, born out of necessity rather than, actual love.
That's not uncommon, though, especially in post-World War II Europe.
You're right. A lot of people went through tremendous trauma loss.
Exactly. I mean, rebuilding lives and societies, it often prioritized practicality over sentiment.
Right. And then it makes you wonder if, for some, practicality became like a defense mechanism against more potential loss.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like, if we don't expect love, we can't be disappointed kind of thing.
That's a very insightful observation. And, this pattern seems to repeat itself in the next generation, too.
What do you mean?
Well, Chris mentions that his mother never felt truly loved by her own mother, and that lack of love, that emotional gap, it really influenced her choices.
Oh, you mean like marrying an abusive man against her own parents' advice?
Exactly. Which unfortunately brings us to another difficult part of Chris's story,
Yeah, this is where things get even darker. He recounts this one memory. It's just incredibly disturbing.
What happened?
His father kicking his mother in the face. Chris was only 3 years old at the time.
Oh, that's horrific.
It is. He says the image stayed with him. Can you imagine witnessing that kind of violence as a toddler?
No, it's just awful, and the lasting impact it must have had.
Absolutely. It's a stark reminder of how childhood trauma, especially witnessing violence, can leave these really deep scars,
For sure. And unfortunately, from what I gather, this was just one instance among many.
Right, the abuse continued.
Took on different forms, too, I bet.
Absolutely. Like his father forcing him to work in the fields.
Instead of studying. Or did you say he was musical?
Yeah, he was passionate about music, but his father didn't care. Needed cheap labor, I guess.
It's almost like he was trying to crush any sense of individuality, any spark Chris had.
Yeah, that control and domination. And then it gets worse.
Worse. How?
His father threatened to kill his younger brother, Adam.
Oh, my God.
I know. And Adam, he was even younger than Chris. He actually defended his brother with a knife.
Wow, what a terrifying situation for both of them.
I can't imagine. And for Chris, it seems like this was the real turning point. That escaping wasn't just a desire anymore, it was a necessity.
You said he escaped in '89, just before the wall came down.
January of '89. With Adam, of course.
Wow, what timing. And it's more than just fleeing an abusive home at that point.
It is. It becomes about seeking freedom in the broadest sense. Freedom from the abuse, freedom from the oppressive regime.
Yeah, freedom from everything holding him back. But escaping communist Poland in those days, I mean, that was incredibly risky.
Oh, absolutely. Could have meant imprisonment, even death.
It really underscores the desperation of their situation. They were willing to risk everything for a chance at a better life.
And that's just the beginning of the story.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, yeah, there's a twist.
A twist? What kind of twist?
A twist, all right. Turns out Chris had another reason for getting out of Poland.
Another reason, on top of everything else.
Yeah. He was being pressured to spy for the communist government.
To spy? Seriously?
Yeah, while on tour with his orchestra in Western Europe, no less.
Wow. That just adds a whole other layer of complexity to this whole escape.
Right. It really does.
So it wasn't just about getting away from an abusive father. It was about, like, navigating this web of political intrigue, too.
Exactly. It's crazy to think about, this young man already dealing with so much trauma and loss.
Right?
And then suddenly he's thrust into this high-stakes world of, well, espionage.
And remember, this is 1989. The Cold War was still very much a reality.
Oh, absolutely. Stakes were incredibly high. So it's not just personal freedom at play here, but potentially like international relations and who knows, maybe even global security.
I hadn't thought about it like that.
And what gets me is that, he's traveling with a Baroque orchestra. You wouldn't think that would put you on the radar for recruitment as a spy.
You'd be surprised. Intelligence agencies back then, they were always looking for people who had access to information, no matter the profession.
Really? Like what kind of information could they get from a musician? Sheet music.
Haha, no, not the sheet music itself, but think about it. He's traveling to Western Europe, interacting with all sorts of people, attending events.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
He would have had this unique vantage point, right?
Into Western European society, maybe even politics.
Exactly.
So what? They wanted him to just like eavesdrop on conversations or something?
Possibly. Or, gauge public opinion toward communism, identify potential sympathizers, who knows, maybe even gather intel on military stuff.
Military stuff from a musician.
Hey, you never know. Those cultural exchange programs during the Cold War, they were often seen as a way to, like, promote ideology, gather information.
I guess that makes sense.
It's all part of the game.
So how did they pressure him? Was it all cloak and dagger threats, or was it more subtle?
Well, it depended. Sometimes it was outright coercion, like threats to family, imprisonment.
Wow.
But other times they'd use more psychological tactics.
Oh, like what?
Appeal to patriotism, a sense of duty, be a hero for your country type of thing.
That's pretty manipulative.
It was. They might promise rewards, special privileges, maybe even exploit someone's financial problems to get them to cooperate.
Wow. It's just messed up, to prey on people's weaknesses like that.
Yeah, it was a complicated time, morally ambiguous. The lines between right and wrong were often blurred.
Especially in the midst of the Cold War.
Exactly. And for someone like Chris, who was already dealing with the trauma of abuse and seeking freedom,
Right.
that kind of pressure must have been immense.
Absolutely. Imagine he's just a teenager, passionate about music, and he gets caught in this web of international intrigue. It's a lot to handle.
It is. And it makes you wonder how many other people were in similar situations, forced to make impossible choices.
Right. Between their own safety and their conscience.
Exactly. And, that's what keeps me hooked on Chris's story.
Me too.
We're left wondering, how did he respond to all of this? Did he resist? Did he give in?
Well, the excerpts we have, it doesn't actually reveal his decision.
Oh, man, really? What a cliffhanger.
I know, but we can speculate, can't we, based on what we know about Chris?
Right. Like his resilience, his faith.
Yeah, he talked a lot about his beliefs. He seems like a guy with a strong sense of right and wrong. It's hard to imagine someone like that engaging in espionage.
Especially against the very system he's trying to escape.
Exactly. And let's not forget about Adam,
Right. His younger brother, he wouldn't want to put Adam at risk by getting involved in something so dangerous.
Absolutely. I think that sense of responsibility probably weighed heavily on him.
Yeah, the desire to create a better, safer life for his brother. It's a powerful motivator.
It is, and it reminds me of how they escaped their father in the first place. It wasn't just about individual survival. It was about, like, building a better future together.
Definitely. It shows the strength of their bond and their shared hope, for a life free from fear, free from oppression.
And it all comes back to this idea of resilience. Despite everything he went through, Chris never seems to give up hope.
That's what makes this story so compelling. It's a testament to the power of the human spirit to, persevere, even when things seem impossible.
It really is, and it leaves us with so many questions, doesn't it?
It does. Like, what happened next? Did Chris make it out of this situation? Did he find that freedom and peace he was looking for?
Those are the questions that keep me up at night. Man, what a story. I mean, we've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? From an idyllic childhood shattered by tragedy to escaping an abusive home in communist Poland, and then to top it all off, facing pressure to become a spy. It's like something out of a movie.
It really is. It's amazing how Chris's life intersected with such major historical events.
Totally. And that cliffhanger from last time, it's killing me. Did he or didn't he? I mean, cooperate with the communist government, that is?
It's the million-dollar question. Unfortunately, this excerpt doesn't give us a definitive answer, but like we were saying before, I think we can make some educated guesses, right?
Right. Based on what we already know about Chris, especially his character. He was deeply religious, placed a huge value on honesty. Would someone like that be willing to betray his values, to engage in espionage, especially against the very system he risked his life to escape?
Tough to imagine, isn't it? Plus, there's Adam to consider, too.
Yeah, his younger brother, Chris, was so protective of him. I can't see him doing anything that would put Adam in danger.
Makes sense. I mean, remember that moment when Adam defended Chris from their father? With a knife, no less?
Oh yeah, I get chills just thinking about it. That showed serious guts and loyalty.
Right. They were in it together through thick and thin. That kind of bond, it would make it even harder for Chris to make a choice that could jeopardize both of their futures.
You know what? I'm starting to think that the pressure to spy, it might have actually backfired.
Backfired.
Yeah, instead of pushing him towards cooperating, maybe it just pushed him further away.
Oh, that's an interesting take.
Right, like the government, in trying to control him, they actually just solidified his resolve to escape. Find a place where he could be truly free from both personal and political oppression.
It's almost like they underestimated his strength, his determination.
Definitely. The whole thing is a David versus Goliath story, really.
It is. This young man, armed with nothing but his faith, his talent, and love for his brother, standing up to this massive, oppressive regime.
It gives me chills just thinking about it.
It's inspiring. It shows how powerful the human spirit can be. That will to break free, to forge your own path. It's universal.
It really is, and it makes you realize that even when things seem hopeless, there's always, always hope. That possibility of escaping a bad situation, creating a better future. Not just for yourself, but for those you care about.
Couldn't agree more. In Chris's story, it also reminds us to look beyond the headlines.
What do you mean?
Well, the Cold War, it was a major historical event, but we often forget that it was made up of countless individual stories. People like Chris, caught in the crossfire.
It's easy to get lost in the big picture, isn't it? But ultimately, it's the personal stories, the human experiences that truly capture the impact of these historical events.
Exactly. They remind us that even in the darkest of times, the human spirit is capable of incredible resilience and hope.
Well said. Unfortunately, this excerpt doesn't tell us what ultimately happened to Chris and Adam after they reached West Berlin.
It's true, we're left with a lot of unanswered questions. But that's part of what makes it so fascinating, wouldn't you say?
I completely agree. It sparks this curiosity, makes you want to dig deeper, find out more.
Right. Maybe read his full memoir, see what other account from that era exist. You never know what you might find.
Absolutely. And who knows, maybe our own deep dives into history, into other people's lives, maybe those can inspire us to face our own challenges with a bit more of that same resilience that Chris showed.
Now, that's a great thought to leave our listeners with.
Indeed. Don't let this be the end, folks. Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and you never know what amazing stories you might uncover.
That's the beauty of deep dives, isn't it? They spark our curiosity and imagination, leading us down these amazing paths of discovery.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Until next time, everyone.